Are you plagued with a myriad of symptoms that have been diagnosed as chronic candidiasis or the yeast syndrome or overgrowth of yeast in your system? I'm Dr. Bessie Jo Tillman. Most folks call me Dr. Joe, and I became a physician in the early 1970s, and by the early 1980s I was a mess. I didn't know why I was feeling so bad, but my gastrointestinal system was completely upset all the time. There were a lot of foods I just could not eat anymore. I had recurrent bladder infections and vaginal yeast infections, and it was like I knew my colleagues wouldn't really know what to do with me. So at that point, I started doing my own research, and I visited a doctor who was doing some nutritional programs and allergy testing. And you know, when he started telling me about the yeast overgrowth problem, the yeast syndrome, I thought, that is what I have. And sure enough, I did. I had terrible yeast overgrowth. So I can understand how you feel if you're putting up with all those miserable things. It's not fun at all. Well, first thing he did was tell me to stop eating sugar, and I thought, stop eating sugar? I was a sugarholic. I couldn't imagine not eating sugar. So I thought, well, I'll just stop for a little while, and then I can go back and I'll be, to eating the same old way, and I'll be okay. Well, that was a laugh, wasn't it? It's like, that was what got me in trouble in the first place, eating all those sweets. I mean, I ate healthy meals too, but I ate a lot of sweets along with that. And plus, I'd had antibiotics and pregnancies, and I'd had prednisone now and then for poison oak, and it was like I had taken birth controls. I'd done all those things that upset the body, upset the normal organisms in the body, and caused yeast overgrowth. Well, that set me on my quest for health. And that's when I got into natural medicine, looking at nutrition and other things that would nourish the cells and detoxify them so that my body would heal. In that process, I looked at the research of some pioneer doctors in nutrition. Dr. Price, Dr. Pottinger, Dr. Page. And you know what? They found out that there are basically certain foods that work really well for our bodies and certain foods that don't. And those certain foods that work well for our body create an environment in our gut that the yeast doesn't really like, so they don't live on it very well, so then they start dying off, and the bacteria that are good for us in our gut start thriving and growing and replenishing in the GI tract. And then we're not getting so many yeast toxic byproducts into our systems, and we can start to heal. Of course, there's a lot of other things, a number of other things anyway, that you need to do to get yeast under control. But nutrition is the foundation of it all. If you try throwing antifungal medication, anti-yeast medication into your body to get to the yeast, and you're still eating all that food that feeds them, well, you're fighting a losing battle. I used to tell the little children that came to see me that had yeast overgrowth, and there are a lot of kids that do because of all the antibiotics we throw at them, that you need to outsmart those little critters. You need to feed you without feeding them, because when you feed those little yeast critters the things they like, they're pooping and peeing inside of you and making you feel miserable. Now, that may be a bit graphic, but that's exactly what's going on. So, in the process of finding a nutrition program that worked, I found a nutrition program that worked for all kinds of health problems, because it got down to the truth of what works for the human body. And over the years, with my experience with patients, we put all the tricks and tips and ideas that we had accumulated into this cookbook called the Dr. Joe's Natural Healing Cookbook. And it's a perfect candida diet, a perfect yeast-free diet, a perfect diet to deal with those food allergies you develop when you have that yeast overgrowth in your system. And it's just really easy to implement. The first 48 pages tell you how to do it, and it's easy reading because there's a lot of charts. Well, for instance, look at this chart. The Class A foods, those are the ones that feed you without feeding the yeast. If you eat just those Class A foods for 4 to 8 weeks, that starts getting those yeast critters on the run and out of your system and back in the right balance. Class B foods still tend to feed the yeast, even though they're really good foods. But once you've gotten through that first 4 to 8 weeks on the Class A foods, you can start adding these Class B foods back in gradually and see how you do. And you know what? You'll love eating this way. I love eating this way. It's so tasty, and it just makes my body feel good, and I love all the beautiful different colors of food we use that make the meals look so gorgeous. The second part of the cookbook is some more help on weight loss. Most people don't even need that part, because once they implement the eating plan in the first section of the book, the weight just comes off naturally or stabilizes naturally. And the third section of the cookbook is just wonderful recipes. All of these recipes are wonderful for a yeast-free diet, for a diet that feeds you without feeding the yeast. So if you would like to know more about this eating plan, please join us at naturalhealingcookbook.com. That's where you'll find out even more recipes. You can try some of the recipes that are posted there, and you can find out how to get a hold of this cookbook if you'd like to have it. I'm so glad you joined me. I hope we get together again real soon over these dining table chats. So long.